Sometimes life takes you back to the places that never stopped waiting for you. For Sarah Chen, that place was a small forgotten town on the edge of Louisiana, Willow Creek. The air there always felt heavier, thicker, as if time moved slower. She hadn't been back in over 20 years, but when the letter came, it felt like a pull she couldn't resist. The mailbox at the end of the gravel road leaned sideways, rust eating through its metal, the paint long faded. Inside, under a pile of unpaid bills and takeout menus, was a single envelope sealed with red wax. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Her grandfather, the man who had raised her when her parents died, was gone. And in his will, he left her 30 acres of swamp land in the middle of nowhere, known to the locals as Junk Lake. The same swamp she used to dream about as a child, the one he warned her never to go near. "Stay away from that water," he used to whisper. "It remembers what it takes." Sarah didn't believe in curses, but that memory crawled back as she read the letter. She was 6 months pregnant, barely hanging onto her job and weeks from eviction, so she packed what little she owned, buckled her son Tommy into the passenger seat, and drove toward the only thing she had left, her grandfather's land. She thought she was going to rebuild her life. She didn't know she was driving straight into his secret. The road to Junk Lake was narrow, broken, and overgrown. The trees leaned so close that it felt like they were listening. When Sarah and Tommy finally arrived, the swamp opened before them, black water stretching far into the mist with twisted cypress roots rising like fingers from the mud. The cabin stood crooked at the edge, half swallowed by vines, its roof sagging, its windows gray with dirt. "This is it?" Tommy asked, wrinkling his nose. Sarah forced a smile. Home, sweet home. The air smelled of rain, moss, and something older, like metal and memory. As she walked onto the porch, the floorboards groaned under her boots. Inside, the walls were covered in dust, but on the mantel sat a faded photo of her grandfather holding a fishing rod, smiling in the same spot where she stood now. That night, as the sun bled into the horizon, Tommy ran toward the lake barefoot, laughing. "Mom, look what I found!" He held out a silver compass, its glass cracked but the needle still spinning wildly. Sarah took it, turning it over in her hand. There were tiny initials carved on the back, TB. She frowned. "Thomas Beaumont," her grandfather's name. "Where did you find this?" she asked. "In the mud," Tommy said proudly. "It was just waiting for me." That night, Sarah dreamed of the swamp, the sound of water whispering softly, not in words but in warnings. The next morning, Sarah drove into town for supplies. The grocery store clerk, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, looked at her receipt and said, "You're a Beaumont?" When she nodded, he grew quiet. "That swamp of yours. You be careful out there." Confused, she drove back and found someone waiting by her cabin, an old woman sitting on the steps like she'd been there for hours. "You must be Claude's granddaughter," the woman said. "I'm Mrs. Evangeline Thibodeau. Your granddaddy was a good man. Strange but good." Sarah invited her inside, and over tea the woman began to talk. "There was a reporter once," she said softly. "Celeste Broussard. Came here in '83 asking questions about missing people, dirty money, and land deeds. Then one day she vanished. Folks said she drowned, but no one ever found a body. After that, your grandfather stopped talking to anyone. Spent every day guarding that swamp like it was a grave." Sarah's skin prickled. "Do you think she's buried out there?" The old woman smiled, slow and knowing. "Child, that swamp don't bury the truth. It hides it till someone's brave enough to dig it up." Sarah didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her grandfather's face, and the compass glowing faintly on the nightstand beside her bed. Days passed. The swamp grew louder. The frogs, the wind, even the creaks of the cabin seemed to hum with life. One afternoon, Tommy came running up from the shore, his hands muddy and shaking. "Mom, I found something else." He opened his palm, revealing a small gold locket covered in dirt. Sarah wiped it clean, and inside was a faded photo of a woman with gentle eyes. On the back were the words, "For my darling Thomas, until we meet again. Love, Margaret." Sarah's heart stopped. That night she drove into town again to the parish library. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, looked at the locket and gasped. "That's Margaret Whitmore," she said. "She was an heiress from Charleston. Went missing in 1947 after she fell in love with a man named Thomas Beaumont. Sarah's blood ran cold. My grandfather. The librarian nodded sadly. They said her father tried to stop them. After she vanished, Thomas disappeared too. Some said they ran away. Others said the swamp took them both. That night back at the cabin, Sarah borrowed a metal detector from a neighbor. Under the pale moonlight, she and Tommy followed its beeping until it screamed near the roots of an old cypress tree. Tommy dug with his hands, mud splashing his clothes until they hit something hard. An old wooden box. Inside were letters, photographs, and a folded piece of paper. A land deed signed Thomas Beaumont and Margaret Whitmore. Sarah looked out at the still lake. The air felt heavier, like the swamp was holding its breath. The next day, a car rolled slowly up the dirt road. It was black, shiny, too clean for a place like this. Two people stepped out, a man with silver hair and a young woman in a dark suit. "Ms. Chen," the man said with a polite smile, "we represent a company interested in purchasing your land." "It's not for sale," Sarah said immediately. His smile never reached his eyes. "You might want to reconsider. That area can be unpredictable." They drove away, but she didn't believe for a second they were gone for good. That night she locked the doors, shut the windows, and kept a flashlight beside her bed. Just before dawn she woke up to a sound and splashing. She ran outside. "Tommy!" she shouted. He was waist deep in the lake, holding something shiny. "It's another compass," he yelled, grinning. This one was gold with new initials, RC, and a date, June 15th, 1962. Sarah's heart raced. Behind the trees something moved. A shadow. Watching. She grabbed Tommy's hand and pulled him inside. "We're leaving tomorrow," she whispered. But deep down she knew. The swamp wasn't done with them yet. 2 days later, Detective Mills arrived. "Mrs. Chen," she said, "the items your son found match evidence from a missing persons case. A man named Robert Henley vanished here in 1999. That compass belonged to him." Sarah's stomach turned. What was he doing here? The detective shook her head. "No one knows. But people have been looking for this place for a long time." That night Sarah sat awake, staring out the window. The swamp glowed faintly under the moon, its surface moving as if it were breathing. Around midnight, headlights appeared in the distance, stopping near the trees. She turned off the lights, heart racing. Whoever they were searching. But not for her. They wanted what her grandfather had hidden. The truth. At sunrise, Sarah and Tommy returned to the old cypress tree. The air was cold, still almost waiting. They dug deeper where the first box had been. Beneath the mud, they found another, and smaller, metal and sealed tight. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow and damp but readable. The handwriting was her grandfather's. 1952. They came again. Said they'd pay me for the land, threatened Eleanor. I told them this land wasn't for sale. There's something under here they want. I buried the deeds. The truth sleeps in the swamp. It remembers. The last entry stopped her breath. "If you're reading this, Sarah, protect what's ours." Just then she heard footsteps. Earl Morrison, the man from the black car, stepped out of the mist, gun in hand. "You've found it," he said softly. "Now hand it over." Tommy squeezed her hand. "Run," she whispered. Shots rang out. Birds exploded into the sky. Sarah didn't look back. She just ran, clutching her son, the sound of her grandfather's voice echoing in her mind. The swamp remembers. Weeks later, federal agents searched the swamp. They found everything. Gold, stolen documents, records of crimes buried for decades. It became front-page news. The swamp's secret. The state offered Sarah protection, even money, but she refused to sell. The land wasn't a curse anymore. It was her family's truth. Every evening, she stood on the porch with Tommy, watching the sun sink behind the cypress trees. The compass sat on the windowsill, its needle trembling toward the water, never still. "It's alive," Tommy once said. Sarah smiled. "Maybe it is." The swamp was quiet again, peaceful, almost grateful. Sometimes the wind carried voices through the trees. Laughter, whispers. Maybe even her grandfather's. And if you're listening right now, maybe in your room, Maybe on a long drive, maybe in the dark before sleep. I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from? And what time is it where you're listening right now? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because somewhere out there another story is waiting. And like the swamp, it remembers you too.